I had been working with somebody whose family was from right up the street here in Rockport, and she and I developed a script together, and I lived in LA for many years.
Jonathan Frakes was a beloved face on Star Trek, The Next Generation. But what happened to him after the cameras stopped rolling? The story behind the star you thought you knew might surprise you. Jonathan Frakes, forever etched in pop culture, as Commander Riker from Star Trek, The Next Generation, seemed destined for stardom. But after the colossal flop of the 2004 movie Thunderbirds, his career took a devastating nosedive. Overnight, Hollywood turned its back. Calls from studios stopped. Offers vanished. He was forced to sell off personal possessions just to stay afloat. His wife even opened a store to help pay the bills. He dubbed this dark period movie jail, vanishing from the big screen for nearly 20 years. Yet, behind this public fall from grace lies a powerful comeback story, one Hollywood quietly tried to erase. Jonathan Frakes was born August 19, 1952, in a modest hospital in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, a small town with an outsized reputation among locals. His parents, James and Doris, lived nearby in State College, but babies were born in Bellefonte. Jonathan once joked that Penn State professors came more for the town's liquor stores than to visit him. James, his father, was a respected English professor. Doris, his mother, a devoted schoolteacher. When Jonathan was 5, the family moved to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, after his dad landed a position at Lehigh University. It was there that Jonathan and his younger brother Daniel were raised, though tragedy struck when Daniel later died of pancreatic cancer in 1997. In 4th grade, Jonathan was handed a trombone, not by choice, but because of his long arms. That chance assignment sparked a lifelong love of music. His father introduced him to jazz, and Jonathan was hooked. He joined the Liberty High School Grenadier Band, a Bethlehem institution, renowned for their electrifying performances. In 1970, the band traveled to Florida for the Festival of States, sweeping top prizes in both field and parade competitions. The town was so proud they renamed a city street in their honor. Jonathan loved every moment, often saying the band was more popular than the football team. Their halftime shows drew crowds from miles around. After high school, Jonathan enrolled at Penn State as a psychology major, but a summer job as an usher at a theater festival changed everything. When a director invited him to join a play, Jonathan saw firsthand the joy and camaraderie of acting. He switched his major to theater arts, later admitting that while it wasn't the most practical choice, it was life-changing. At Penn State, he immersed himself in drama, joining the thespians, performing non-stop shows, often sacrificing sleep. He graduated in 1974 with a BFA, and went on to Harvard's prestigious Loeb Drama Center professional acting program. Summers were spent with real theater companies, learning from seasoned actors and directors, an intense, hands-on education that would shape his career. With degree in hand, Jonathan moved to New York City, chasing the actor's dream. But life in the city was tough. He worked odd jobs, waiting tables, moving furniture, once injuring his back, while auditioning for roles. He performed with the Impossible Ragtime Theater and landed a part in Eugene O'Neill's The Hairy Ape. By 1976, he made it to Broadway in the musical Shenandoah. One of his most unusual gigs was dressing as Captain America for Marvel Comics at conventions. Not glamorous, but it taught him how to connect with fans, a skill that would prove invaluable later. In 1977, Jonathan scored his first major role on the NBC soap The Doctors as Vietnam veteran Tom Carroll. The steady paycheck was a relief, but the role ended, and his agent urged him to try Los Angeles. In 1978, he moved west. LA brought more TV gigs, guest spots on Charlie's Angels, Fantasy Island, The Waltons, Quincy, M.E., and The Dukes of Hazzard. Though small roles, they built his resume and reputation. In 1979, he appeared in Beach Patrol, a TV movie pilot produced by Aaron Spelling. The show never got picked up, just another dead end. Then, in 1983, a big break seemed to arrive. NBC cast him in Bare Essence, a primetime soap with high hopes, but audiences tuned out, and the show was canceled almost immediately. A crushing disappointment, but the set was where Jonathan met Genie Francis, who would become a significant part of his life. Their first meeting? Far from love at first sight. Jonathan Frakes once joked about Genie Francis's hair. Light teasing, nothing serious. But fate wasn't done with them yet. 2 years after their first awkward meeting, in 1985, they crossed paths again on the sprawling set of North and South, a massive Civil War mini-series filmed over 6 grueling months across the southern United States. This time, something clicked. Their relationship blossomed, and with it came the next big chapter of Frakes' career. He landed the role of Commander William Riker on Star Trek: The Next Generation. This was the moment everything changed. Despite being engaged to Genie, their wedding plans had to be postponed twice due to his relentless shooting schedule. But on May 28, 1988, during the show's first hiatus, they finally tied the knot. A private victory amid a public rise. Yet in 1987, Frakes was far from the obvious pick for Riker. Other actors like Billy Campbell, Michael O'Gorman, and Jeffrey Combs were frontrunners. The studio leaned toward different choices, but Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry saw something special in Jonathan. More than just talent, perhaps a spark of himself. Roddenberry didn't just quietly back Frakes. He campaigned vigorously, making calls and pushing hard behind the scenes. Thanks to his support, Frakes won the role that would define him for decades. Once on set, Jonathan unintentionally created what fans now call the Riker maneuver. It wasn't scripted or planned, just a practical solution to awkwardly low chairs. Instead of sitting normally, he swung his leg over the chair's back. It looked bold, maybe even a little cocky. Frakes joked it might have seemed like an asshole move, but fans loved it. The move became iconic, inspiring a tribute in Star Trek: Lower Decks, where Jack Quaid's character shouted "Riker" as he mounted a saddle just like that. The best of both worlds wasn't just a thrilling storyline, it revealed a new dimension to Riker's character through his electric scenes with Commander Shelby, played by Elizabeth Dennehy. Their subtle battle of wills, Riker rolling his eyes while Shelby pushed harder, sparked fan speculation. Years later, theater audiences still remembered the elevator scene where someone shouted, "Read it, girl!" capturing the memorable tension. Fans imagined a universe where Riker was captain, and Shelby his trusted number one, a tantalizing what-if that hinted at Riker's own doubts about leadership. Not everything about Star Trek was serious business. Frakes shared that Gene Roddenberry told him not to smile on set. The irony wasn't lost on him. Cast members were loud, playful, and constantly laughing. Frakes, Patrick Stewart, and Brent Spiner wanted to channel that energy on screen, emulating the dynamic of the original trio: Bones, Spock, and Kirk. They didn't just deliver lines, they teased each other, rolled their eyes, and had fun. That genuine camaraderie bled into their characters and every episode. When Jonathan first asked to direct an episode of TNG, producers didn't take him seriously. Rick Berman, the executive producer, didn't outright refuse but wore a look of doubt that Frakes couldn't miss. Instead of arguing, Jonathan went silent and worked harder than ever. He spent nearly 300 hours in editing rooms, joined casting sessions, and attended every pre-production meeting he could. Then he delivered a 47-page presentation, packed with hand-drawn storyboards, camera setups, and character breakdowns. This master plan earned a nickname: the Riker Directive. Finally, Berman saw Jonathan not just as an actor, but as a filmmaker. His first directorial effort was The Offspring, a heartfelt episode about Data creating an android daughter. Directing while playing Commander Riker wasn't easy. Frakes ran back and forth from behind the camera to the front, enduring 18-hour days and little sleep. Despite his exhaustion, the episode aired in March 1990 to widespread praise. Even then, Frakes was humble. He asked editors to cut his own scenes shorter, admitting he preferred directing to acting. Not everyone was instantly on board, though. Patrick Stewart was publicly polite, but privately skeptical that an actor could successfully direct his peers. Marina Sirtis, nervous about a romantic subplot with Frakes, barely looked him in the eye on the first day. Brent Spiner prepared detailed notes to protect Data's character, but Frakes didn't wield his director title like a weapon. He focused on performance, watched carefully, and led with respect. By day 2, Stewart was convinced. Sirtis was laughing again, and Spiner had put his notes away. The entire cast started to realize Jonathan Frakes wasn't just an actor who got lucky. He had trained for this. What they didn't see was what he called his stealth directing. Whenever he had scenes as Riker, Frakes arrived 90 minutes early, meticulously preparing every angle. He came armed with shot lists and had already mapped everything out with the cinematographer. While the rest of the crew took their lunch breaks, he locked himself away in the editing bay, reviewing footage no one had asked him to check. He just did it. That's how he kept the production running smoothly without ever making it look like he was showing off. And when it came to camera work, Frakes had a secret weapon. After long shoots, he would meet with Marvin Rush, the show's director of photography, at a small bar called the Warp Core. Over glasses of Macallan 18, Rush taught Frakes cinematography basics, light placement, angles, composition, all scribbled on bar napkins. Frakes kept dozens of those napkins. 13 still hang framed in his office. By the time Paramount was casting Star Trek: First Contact, Frakes wasn't their first choice. Big names like Ridley Scott and John McTiernan had already turned it down. But Frakes knew Star Trek better than anyone. He understood the tone, the characters, the world, and Paramount took a chance. Frakes had 10 weeks to prepare and 12 weeks to shoot, a massive leap from the 7-day cycles of television. To get ready, he studied classics like Jaws, Close Encounters, and 2001: A Space Odyssey. He dissected James Cameron's and Ridley Scott's work. The pressure was on. This was no longer TV. This was cinema. One major change came with the creation of the Borg Queen. Originally, the Borg were meant to be a mindless collective, but Paramount's boss, Jonathan Dolgan, insisted the film needed a real villain. Physical, seductive, terrifying. That villain became the Borg Queen, embodied by Alice Krige. Her makeup was legendary. Hours spent turning her into an eerie figure with pale skin, wires for hair, and an elongated skull. Her iconic entrance, her upper body lowered and attached to her spine, took industrial light and magic 5 months to perfect. Everything about First Contact was bigger than TV. Borg makeup that once took an hour now demanded 5. Costuming took 30 minutes to put on, 90 minutes to remove. They needed 50 makeup artists but had fewer than 20. As the shoot progressed, the Borg looked more and more like oil-leaking machines, terrifying and unforgettable. The Queen's floating effect was a bold technical feat. A rig lowered Kriege's body, while a blue suit and digital magic created the illusion she hovered. It worked beautifully. The film was a critical and fan success. Patrick Stewart called it the best-looking Star Trek movie yet. Frakes moved on to direct Star Trek: Insurrection. But lightning didn't strike twice. Reviews were mixed, the story felt flat, and even Stewart said later that Nemesis, which Frakes did not direct, improved on some aspects. The disappointment began to weigh heavily on Frakes' momentum. Then came Thunderbirds in 2004, a big-budget movie based on a beloved brand, starring Bill Paxton and Ben Kingsley, with high hopes attached. But critics savaged it. Audiences stayed away. Frakes later called that period movie jail. No one returned his calls. He had to sell belongings, left London for Maine, and Genie opened a store to keep things afloat. It was a painful reset. He hasn't directed a feature film since, over 20 years ago. But Frakes didn't give up. He returned to TV, to Star Trek, and to the steady work he knew. He directed episodes of newer Star Trek series and shows like The Librarians. TV became a place where you can take a shit, and nobody notices who directed it, he joked. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Jonathan Frakes never set out to fall in love on a movie set. Back in 1985, he was just trying to do his job on the Civil War miniseries North and South. At 32, he was barely on the radar. Genie Francis, however, was already a star, working alongside Patrick Swayze and Leslie Ann Down. Their relationship started professional, but during a Memorial Day break, a trip to New Orleans changed everything. They'd actually met years earlier on the set of a short-lived show called Bare Essence. Back then, Frakes thought Genie was too young. He was almost 30. She was just 20. The timing wasn't right. North and South gave them a second chance, and this time it worked. "I don't know why she took a chance on me," Frakes still says. They married on May 28, 1988, over 38 years ago. In Hollywood terms, that's an eternity. Genie never appeared in Star Trek, but she didn't need to. She had already become a pop culture icon all on her own. Since 1977, Genie Francis has played Laura Collins on General Hospital, appearing in more than 890 episodes. When she and Jonathan Frakes first met, she was the bigger star. But soon enough, Frakes found his own spotlight as Commander Riker on Star Trek: The Next Generation. They supported each other through it all. Frakes often ran lines with her, helping her tackle those brutal soap opera days, memorizing 30 pages of dialogue on a deadline. Together they raised 2 children. One of them, their daughter Eliza, is now following in their footsteps, writing and acting. But behind all the success, Frakes carries a heavy loss. His brother Daniel died of pancreatic cancer in 1997, just 1 week before Frakes' daughter was born. Daniel wasn't just a sibling, he was his best friend. They had moved to New York together in a beat-up 1967 Chevy sport van, shared tiny apartments and big dreams. When Daniel was diagnosed, doctors tried the Whipple procedure, a major surgery, but the cancer had spread too far. The surgeons closed him back up, offering no hope, just 6 months left. At the time, the survival rate for pancreatic cancer was a grim 4%. Frakes was shattered, but he refused to let the grief sit still. For 25 years, he has worked with PanCan, the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, raising awareness and fighting for better outcomes. His mission turned personal into public. In 2022, he joined fellow Star Trek stars Armin Shimmerman, Kitty Swink, an 18-year survivor, and John Billingsley, to form Trek Against Pancreatic Cancer. They walk every April 29th in the PanCan Purple Stride fundraiser in cities across the country. Frakes usually starts from the Santa Monica Pier. Together, their team has raised tens of thousands for research and support. Thanks to efforts like theirs, things are slowly improving. Survival rates have crept up to around 11 to 12%. Still devastating, but better. PanCan has invested $174 million in research, with $10.5 million in grants just in 2022, part of a record $25 million year. Frakes never stops talking about early detection, especially if pancreatic cancer runs in your family. He knows how fast it can take someone. That's why he keeps walking, speaking, and showing up. After Thunderbirds flopped in 2004, losing around $57 million, crushed by critics, ignored by audiences, Hollywood turned its back on Frakes. Studios didn't want to take a chance on the director of one of the decade's biggest bombs. His name quietly disappeared from directing shortlists. By 2006, he had no choice but to look elsewhere. He returned to TV, directing Nickelodeon kids shows like Zoe 101 and True Jackson, VP. Some speculated he might use a pseudonym out of embarrassment, but he didn't. He kept his real name, even on small projects. Slowly, he rebuilt himself. By 2010, everything changed. He got calls to direct episodes of NCIS, Los Angeles and Castle, major network shows. His name was back in the game. He was no longer the guy who bombed at the box office. He was the guy who stuck around, the guy who kept going. That's when the whispers started. Frakes became the sci-fi fixer. He directed episodes for 17 different sci-fi and fantasy shows that were struggling or searching for their rhythm. Roswell, The Librarians, Warehouse 13, Agents of SHIELD, Orphan Black. When budgets were tight and scripts were messy, they called Frakes. He brought structure, he brought pace, he made it work. By 2016, he had directed over 100 episodes of television, and then the industry started calling him the genre whisperer. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but he got results. He knew how to balance action, character, and humor in shows that often had none of the above when he arrived. In 2018, it seemed like a real comeback was within reach. CBS greenlit a reboot of Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction. Frakes wasn't just hosting, he was set to direct every episode. Fans were excited, the crew was ready. Then, 3 days before production, CBS pulled the plug. Creative differences, they said. Deja vu hit hard. The original Beyond Belief had also struggled. Fox kept moving time slots, then put it on hiatus for 2 years before canceling it. Now, the reboot was dead before it even began. In 2021, he revived the show in Germany. It was called X Factor, Das Unfassbare. They filmed in Los Angeles. He hosted again. A different network, a different country, but the same strange stories. The same calm voice inviting viewers to decide what's real and what's fiction.